the reason why I chose, this particular time frame, which starts from independence, which is 1947, up to the current time, is because there was so much that was happening. Yes, you can look back at art and public space, taking it back to, centuries and, starting from Indus Valley civilization. But that becomes too broad-based. And also, we tend to then kind of lose focus on what is happening now around us. And, art in public space, since I've been watching it so closely, has actually become something that a lot of people are taking up. And that also kind of makes me sensitive and, want to say, like, but what is the right way of doing it? Because you tend to kind of make it very simple, saying that, oh, decorative. And, that's how I chose a relatively shorter span, but not that short, given the time that we have. So I'm going to focus on the broad, like an overview of it. So there are basically, the way public art in India has been shaped has been by the initiative of the government, which is very surprising to hear because we usually like to say, oh, there's nothing that's happening. But surprisingly and interestingly, immediately after our independence, the government took a great deal of initiative, and it actually started with our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who gave and it was just a note that was sent out by him to his minister saying that we are undertaking a massive, building exercise. We are building government offices, different centers. We should encourage the artists of our country, the then practicing artists of our country, encourage them and give them an opportunity to create works that will shape the identity of an independent India. So the 50s is really marked by these phenomenal, commissions that were coming out. And it wasn't kind of in a structured manner. There wasn't a policy, there wasn't a law, but just this directive that was given. And this happened, so this is centered mostly in Delhi. The other place which I'm focusing on, I mean, I'm biased, I'm from Mumbai, I've studied in Mumbai. So I look at Mumbai, what is happening in Mumbai? Mumbai is driven by more of the capitalists. It's their interest and how they kind of take an initiative in making a place of placemaking which comes in. Now, because of these two different, forces behind it, the kind of art that you see is slightly different. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is those of you who've traveled to Delhi, it's a place like everybody knows, it's called as Gyara Murti. Some of them may not even know what that Gyara Murti stands for. There's a popular misconception that this is Gandhiji's, of course, the figure, right up front is Mahatma Gandhi, and you have 10 people kind of following him. And this is associated as the Dandi March. It's not the Dandi March because there were no, this is not how it was imagined. If you look at it, it's basically a representation of different, people from different castes. The message was about creating unity in a newly modern India, right behind the president's, the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which was there. This is made by an artist called D.P. Roy Chaudhary, or Devi Prasad Roy Chaudhary, who was a sculptor who had trained in Shantiniketan and was there at that point, teaching at the Madras Government College of Arts and Craft. Now, this has a message. It aims at uniting the country. It serves, it's kind of a symbolic message. This was done in 1972. However, there's a precedent to this, which is the Shaheed Smarak, which is in Patna. This was commissioned exactly on 15th August 1947 by the Bihar government. It stands for the 7 martyrs of the Quit India movement in 1942, which was initiated in Patna. This was again done by Devi Prasad Roy Chaudhary. It took him 12 years to do it, to complete it, but it was inaugurated by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Basis on this monument, it subsequently then went to Delhi, and again it was replicated. Now, this kind of, political messaging, large, and when you do a sculpture, and this is all done in metal, This one is smaller. When I say it's about 14 feet, the Gyara Murti is 30 feet in length. It's solid cast bronze figures. So it means there's a lot of resources that were allocated to it. And there was a lot of compassion towards the art. The third project that I want to highlight is, again, monumental. This is two large figures, a male and a female, a yaksha and a yakshi or a yakshini, which is right outside the RBI, that's the Reserve Bank of India. Again, commissioned by the government. There was a fantastic committee that was set up, which included, the dean, the principal, as he was called, of the Sir J.D. School of Art, an art historian who set out an open call. 9 artists participated in them. The one that got selected is an artist called Ram Kinkar Bej. That's his sculpture. He carved them in stone. It's Shivalik stone. Each figure stands at about 30 feet tall. Again, it took him 10 years to complete it. And, and surprisingly or interestingly, once they were unveiled, there's a notation in, there was a question by the opposition leader. He said that is it correct that there's a nude woman that's standing outside the RBI facing the population? How do you justify something like that? And mind you, by the time this thing was installed, it is late 1950s or early 60s, and the finance minister had to answer it because it came from their budget. And he said, don't look at it as a nude woman. She is symbolic of, the goddess of fertility, and what the person who's standing next to her is the lord of wealth, or Kuber. And he gave a long spiel on saying that, not a spiel, but he kind of had a very valid point in saying that art historically, how this is representative of Indian culture and how she is prosperity, and this is what the country needs. After that, there were no questions asked. Nobody had any controversy. But till date, the same question continues to dog us. There's a lot of apprehension that happens. But hold on to this thought of the Yakshini, the figure of the Yakshini, because she will come back again in a later example that I'm going to show you. So what the trend, if you can say, that started off, in the decade of the 50s, is to have something that's monumental, is to have something that represents the rich heritage, the long culture of our country, executed by contemporary artists. What I've showed you on the right is a maquette, or the small model that Ram Kinkar Bej made and actually sent it, to the RBI for selection. And today, it's there in the RBI museum. And if you see it from the small figure or the large one, there's no deviation, and it's absolutely stunning to kind of see that. And it's so powerful that it kind of is, an icon of what the RBI should stand for, what the wealth should be. Then I come to Mumbai. Okay. Unfortunately, when I talk about the work that's happening in Mumbai, they're not such great stories, but there's stories nevertheless that we should look at. Again, I don't know how many of you remember, but as a child, I do remember passing by the Haji Ali Circle, which is, what you see is the Dargah, that's the Arabian Sea. And this links from south, Worli, taking you into one road that takes you towards Breach Candy, the other towards Tardib, just a little bit of mapping. Even in this image, I just found it online because for years, I've been asking all the people that I know if they have any photograph, even otherwise, of this space. So the empty circle, the big one that you see, there used to be a huge water fountain there, which was lit and whatever. And the one that I've highlighted over here is a sculpture by Pilu Poch Khanwala. Best, that is Bombay Electrical State Transport, which also is the electrical supply, had commissioned an artist, Pilu Poch Khanwala, to make a sculpture. The brief was as simple as that: do something, for that particular location. Initially, her sculpture was meant to be here, but then it got moved from here to the smaller traffic island. This sculpture, again, about 20 feet tall, was made of scrap metal. And Pilu Poch Khanwala till date is considered to be as one of the finest modern sculptors that the country has. She was a pioneer in the way she used material. She was, again, we're talking about, she started, she's not trained as a sculptor or a fine artist even. She was in the field of advertising, and then she moved, she had an inspiration when she was in one of her travels in Paris, and she said, this is what I want to do. I don't want to make, uh, you know, uh, design or graphic art, but I want to do something that's three-dimensional. She comes back to India, trains under an artist called N.G. Pansare, who is a traditional, wood, stone, metal casting sculptor. But she then learns the basic skills and then evolves them or uses scrap metal. Now, scrap metal itself is something that's, you look at it and say, what is this? Is it really worthy of it, or is it a fine art kind of a material? But she was bold, and she did a lot of work in scrap metal, and this is one of her works, an iconic work. But in the early 90s, when there was, traffic islands, as we all know, in urban planning, fail after a period of time because they cannot just handle the heavy flow of the cars. So the traffic island had to go away. And in that, the sculpture also went away. Nobody knows where. Many stories were there. Some say because it was scrap, it was sold as scrap. And that's the unfortunate state. Now, today we can look at it and say that, it was lack of documentation. There wasn't a governing body who looked at it, or the citizens were not as aware and did not come into play. But that's not really true. There's no way we can go back and correct the mistake or, point fingers or blame. But we can only use this as an example and say what not to do going ahead, and how do we learn from these mistakes and, take care. And that's what, when I worked in the Bangalore Airport project, documentation is something that's absolutely essential for the project. Yes, the glory, the final product, or the final execution that happens is all great, but until and unless you have everything documented, the process, how it was installed, how do you maintain it, how do you decommission it, that becomes very crucial, because that's something that will help people who come after you to know how you deal with this material. I think that's something that's critical, and that's something that stayed with me forever. And it's helped me in my projects. And I think that's why, as much as I feel sad when I look at, when I pass by Hajeli, and I always look at that sculpture, but in my mind, it kind of goes on. But that's it. But that's in the 90s. Cut short to 2021. There was, because this sculpture was lost, there was a replica that was made. Now, again, it's a bit ambiguous whether it's a replica or whether it was a maquette. It was placed right opposite the Prince of Wales Museum, what is known as the CSMVS or Regal, or, the NGMA. So again, a traffic island. And to make way for another political figure's statue, this was removed. Again, those of you from Bombay who follow the media will know that the artist lobby got together, wrote letters. Till date, it's a mystery. So history continues to repeat itself. Pilu Poch Khanwala had made a third sculpture, which at least until the last year was there at the Nehru Planetarium or the Nehru Center, where she made the moon, where it was about, she was commissioned to make that sculpture. Again, it's a fantastic, it's not as great in scale, but it's something that's great in the way she kind of conceptualized. It's not scrap metal, but it belongs to an institution. The difference between what happens in Delhi and what happens in Mumbai, I mean, apart from the fact that they got lost, is that these were initiatives or collaborations that happened with the municipal corporation and individual artists, artists who were practicing, other studio practices who were doing these kind of work, and which is also something that's quite refreshing. And there were new experiments that were happening. Another sculpture, which is again in Worli, the other end of the road, and a woman artist, Prafulla Dhanukar. This is known as the Shivsagar estate, or part of the Poonam chambers, which is there. Again, Prafulla Dhanukar was a very modern artist, abstract works. an important figure in the in the Bombay or the Mumbai art scene. She was part of the Bombay Art Society, the Art Society of India. Very, very dynamic person, and she did this large scale mural on the facade of a building. This was done by a private individual, and unfortunately, during the renovations, this also kind of was lost. So actually, I should have said the lost monuments of public art rather than saying evolution or the development of it. I think that's a bit too pessimistic, but still, there are these images which are there, which also brings to the point that I think something that I can, publicly say, Suki, if Khaki Labs or Khaki Tours can look at this and initiate some kind of, study, survey, documentation of these things, and you go on a walk and put them out for people to look at, I think that is something that's quite critical. Now we come to this very interesting figure. It's called, this is a Marathi term, Nagada Putara. Nagada means naked, and Putara means a sculpture, a statue, not so much as a sculpture. Again, this is in Prabhadevi area. This is done in cement, and it's been there for ages. This is done by this artist called Ramchandra Panduran Kamath. Not much is known. He had a studio in this area. His son continues to live in this space. So this is a sculpture of a farmer, and originally there was, he held a sheaf of maize. There was a pigeon next to it, and what is in between his legs is supposed to be the wheel of science. So it again talks of, and this is again in the 60s where, you talk about development, progress that's happening. And it's actually not a nude figure, because if you see, this is his short little dhoti that kind of is there, but it's got gained popularity as the naked figure. So let's leave it at that and not question it. Again, there was, in the 70s, there was a group of people who came and wanted to take it off or cover it because of what it they felt it was nude. Then the artist who was alive at that point explained to them, this is a farmer, how you need the farmer and how he's not nude. They said, okay, fine. Now you've explained to us, we accept it. Until date, it continues to remain there. It's iconic. It's a landmark again. It's in Prabhadevi area. Now I moved to, again, initially we had the Yakshi in Delhi in RBI. Here's another Yakshi, which was done in 1969 by this artist Kanaya Kunhiraman from Kerala. This was commissioned by the Public Works Department, who built the dam. In front of the dam, there's this large area or a large garden area, and people kind of come collect. It becomes like a public space for them to come and hang out, for picnics, for tourists. And he made, he chose to make a yakshi. And unlike, Ram Kinkar Bej, where he had the ministers kind of backing him up or, not questioning it, this figure came into a lot of controversy. There was a lot of uproar in the local press, Malayalam press, even the English press, saying that how can you have such a blatantly nude figure? And again, she stands tall at 26 feet or 21 feet. And, this is not, this is objectionable. There are families and children coming in. But the artist stood his ground. And he kind again, explained that this is not about, it's not an erotic sculpture. It's not meant to titillate, but, Yakshi is the fertility goddess, and she brings in so much of life. And then he gave into an example, like the name Palakkad means Pala is the tree, and I'm not quite familiar with the language. So basically, what he meant was that the name is also something that alludes to something that's fertile and fertility. And he went on to explain that. Unfortunately, there was more that was to come around this area, but that didn't happen because there was a lot of, how should I say, people didn't accept it easily, so funds were short. And then it kind of was just kind of blocked and then left at that. It was not even maintained for a very long period of time. But I think about 5 years ago, there was some interest. The artist took an initiative. It was kind of maintained, cleaned up, painted. Otherwise, it's made of cement. And so how do you deal with something like that? The next thing that I move. So what happens is, so we after this intense activity, which was there in the decade of the 50s and 60s, there's a change that happened in the country. We all kind of are aware what happens. You have the emergency setting in. There's a disillusionment that comes in amongst the youth, which is there. And in all of this, art kind of takes a backseat. The focus is not so much on, something that's to celebrate or something that you need to look up, but there is a dejection that not much is happening in the country. We're not progressing as a country. Uh, you know, so the public commissions kind of dry up. You don't see so much of activity that is happening. The shift that happens is now you start seeing what we see a lot today is in public squares or town squares, you have political figures that are kind of put up because it's driven by a political agenda. It comes in as as kind of a checkbox that you need to have in that particular place. But at the same time, interestingly, 1972 is the time when India officially gets a ministry for culture. Till this time, all matters relating to culture, art, sat under the education ministry. And the education ministry was looking after this. When this breakaway happens, this is something that I'm still trying to wrap around my head, and it's part of my ongoing study. That at one hand, you had, art being kind of pushed behind. There was a very clear-cut demarcation that was happening. But at the same time, you had a new ministry that was being established to look after these aspects of heritage, culture, art in whatever form, and a ministry's form. This is also the time when the Antiquities Act of India is brought into force. Where you cannot, and of course that ties into the UNESCO, referendum amendment or act that happens, then which kind of gets implemented in India. So it's all like kind of two different directional pushes and pulls that are coming in. But it's good because what happens is first, and I think India is one of the earliest countries to kind of adopt this, saying that 1% of the budget for a new project, a new infrastructure project, which means that if there is, for instance, that's where the Bangalore Airport kind of comes in. A question that you need to ask is how is it that the so-called public spaces, which is airports, bus stations, railway stations, are allocating funds for art. They use or they go back to this. It's not even it's not even a proper bill that is. It's just a recommendation that was made by the ministry, the cultural ministry, to say that allocate 1% of all funds associated with the new infrastructure project towards art. The original wording for it was not just art, but traditional art and craft. And until and unless that 1% was not shown into your entire workings of the project, you would not get a certificate to occupy the space or operationalize the space. So this is something which is there, and most, at least in Delhi, till date, it is followed to a T. And in other parts of the country also, it happened. Mumbai was the first airport to kind of pick that up and utilize it. And after that, a whole lot of airports have been using that clause and saying that we can bring in art and a percent of that budget goes into it. That's one part of it. The second thing that happened, and again, it's specific to Delhi, is that in 1973, there was a Delhi Urban Arts Commission that was formed. And the mandate was very clear. And I wish and I hope that they followed it to a T, saying that when any new, complex or a building or, residential, commercial, office, whatever it is, had to be passed by the Urban Arts Commission, so that they ensure that the skyline of the city is not impacted and that it is, in line with aesthetic sensibility. These are the words which are there in the document. And like, if that is there, what happened? Like, Where does it go wrong, and why do you see things like that? If you go into Delhi today, again, you have, where what used to be the Kidwai Nagar with low-rise homes, suddenly these gigantic complex of skyscrapers, which are done, I'm sorry to say, but they're ghastly, and they just disrupt everything of that particular area. And you have a Delhi Urban Arts Commission sitting there since 1973. These are questions and mysteries that we can't travel in this short conversation, but it is there. And the third trend that happens, which is more obvious in Bombay, is that artists are taken up more than now you call them as artists, but they were young students at that time who take to art as as a vehicle to communicate their ideas on what is wrong with life, how they should do it correctly, or take it forward. So these are the three trends that happened in 73. So there's a break in this, the governmental support which was there, and monumental structures coming in. It kind of gets formalized in some terms of saying, how do you need to do it? What is the budget allocation? To Urban Arts Commission, which is more Delhi kind of a thing. And then what happens in Bombay with young artists kind of wanting to develop and create, you know, monuments. For instance, the picture, sorry, just so the last picture you see over here at the bottom is three artists. The one in the black shirt is Altaf. Um, in the t-shirt is Navjot, his partner. In the center is an artist called Shobha Ghare. Now, these were artists who believed that art is to be a vehicle for conveying messages on, on things like equality, rights for education, all different kind of agendas that they had. They would make posters. They used a lot of poster making, and they believed that was the most common way, effective way to communicate to people. And they would go into the mill areas, they would go to schools, they would, have sorry, posters put up on railway stations, so that they can communicate their ideas more effectively. What the three of them are doing over here is they're making a mural in a school, which is in Bindi Bazaar today, which is called Daud Bhai Fazal Bhai School. I have been looking for pictures of that mural, but it's not there. Again, in one of your walks, if you could, right now it's kind of a completely run-down building, but I'm sure if somebody has some archives over there, they can kind of look at it. So the point that I'm trying to make it becomes, there's a different voice that comes in into the 70s, which is along with the grand, well organized, funded, is the individual voice that kind of starts making its presence felt. Bombay continues. So is there, there's an absolute, I won't say absolute, but there's a kind of a dry spell that you see in what happened in the city in the 80s and the 90s. And then slowly when you kind of come into the 2010, there's a renewed effort and interest in wanting to kind of, bring art back into the cities. One agenda is very clear, which you look at anything, which is about saying that it's placemaking, it's linked into tourism, it's linked to, gentrification to a certain point. But apart from all of these things, I think art kind of just changes, like, Sukhi and I were just talking before we kind of got on, saying that it helps you kind of slow down, it helps you sit down, it helps you connect, it makes you think. And these are very positive effects which are there. And I believe that you may notice what is there, you may understand, or you may not understand, it doesn't matter. Even if you don't like it and it makes you say, oh my God, I don't like it, it has made you pause, it has made you respond, it has made you think in a different manner. So it's not only about appreciating, but sometimes it's just about sparking that, that moment, saying that, hang on a minute, what is that? So I believe that the whole idea of bringing art in public space is not only restricted to the decorative, but it really conveys the spirit of the city. It conveys what is it that we want to leave as a legacy for our future generations. How is it that they look at it? How is it that they will understand things? So there's a lot more layered nuances to the entire aspect of art in public spaces. So sometimes it's easy to miss the point. Sometimes you get something that's phenomenal, and it's always a struggle. And I think that's fine as long as it continues to happen. So again, Bombay individual entrepreneurship that comes in. Harsh Goenka, the RPG Foundation, had put out a mandate in 2014 saying that, and they worked with the municipal corporation of Mumbai, saying that we want to make the city beautiful again. And where we had seen Pilu Poch Kanwala's park, which was lost, just little away from there is this Dabbawala, which is kind of installed, which is done by an artist called Valay Shende. It is commissioned by RPG Foundation in collaboration with the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai. That's one. I will now, till my slides come, I'll show you the two airports because that's my space. So that's my most recent projects that have been, I worked with the Mumbai airport, but in a very different role, not while it was being made or commissioned. In Mumbai airport, the first, I could say the first kind of wow moment, or the grandeur that you had of what can be made or how art can be brought into a space like an airport terminal was something that was phenomenal. This was kind of curated by Rajiv Sethi, the scenographer, and his mandate was that this becomes representational of all that is India. So you had a whole range of art forms, traditional, contemporary. For instance, this is what you see over here is paintings of Anjali Menon that have been transferred onto fabric, which is foregrounded against doors from across India. What you see over here is the Maharashtrian theatre tradition, the backdrop stages foregrounded by the wood toys. Or the red one is, of course, a very popular selfie kind of a moment, which is the Tanjore paintings, but contemporized by an artist. So there are many such stories. So just to kind of give you these wow, fantastic figures, it claims that it is the longest art wall in the country with about 4.7, almost 5 kilometers long. It has got about thousands of individual pieces that have been put together. It has classical pieces, it has the master craftsmen. You go onto the website and you will go get everything that you need to know about the art program. So it becomes something that's quite intense, sets out to be saying the grandest and the biggest. When I come to Bangalore, I do it differently. My intention over here was to create an art program that that a passenger experiences from the word go. For instance, the green that you see is like when you enter the terminal building, it's backlit glass, but this is a 180-degree panoramic view of a tree. Now, the Bangalore airport has got 4 design principles on which it was made. The first one is, a terminal in a garden, because Bangalore is known as the garden city, but with urbanization, the gardens have kind of shrunk. So the airport wants to give back the garden experience to the city. The second principle was on sustainability and being, energy efficient, water positive, which they have kind of met. The third one was digital technology, making ease of travel. So Digi-Yatra, self-package drops, all technological driven things which are there. And last not but the least, representation of art and culture. Art and culture, the mandate was for Karnataka. And then how do you bring that in without kind of making it like a Dilli heart or, very standard kind of a thing? So there was a thematic that was woven around it, which was Navrasa, because as a traveler, you experience his emotions as you start your journey and all kind of things which were there. We worked out on a model which was open call and by invitation, an open call so that it reaches out to a larger pool of artists, not only in Karnataka, but across the globe. So we had 4 open calls for each of the locations that we had done. We received about, around 500 entries across various open calls, from which we selected, 43 to 45 artists now to make the works. Instead of having this one gallery experience, we have art staggered. So check-in hall has it, entry vestibule or the entry point has it. The boarding piers will have the largest concentration. When you arrive, you have a different experience. You have the floor inlay, which is kind of done here. Interestingly, what the artist who's made this is part of this call. I won't embarrass him further, but I can see him that he's joined into the call. So, which was based on the board games of Karnataka. This is by Ellen Talur, again, coming through an open call, which is Vimana, the expectations that you have. So artists have worked in reviving. So this artist, Krishna Rajanat, kind of, revived the whole thing of metal chatera, the beating which is there. There's a little bit of digital art that comes in. So it's kind of put in all the experiences or the design expectation or aspirations to make it into something that is, not overwhelming, but part of your journey. There are also partnerships, with two museums, one a private museum and the state museum, to make sure that you have something new, changing that comes into the airport every time that you travel. So overall, the journey was, how do you make it part of a person's journey at every touch point, and there's something that you can relate to or becomes an identifying mark for you. Apart from this, I think the other trend that we see a lot, and which is, I'm only looking at one particular organization, that is START, or Street Plus Art, because they really have been innovators and the movers, the first kind of people to do these kind of things, which is, street art or murals which are painted. The very first project that they did, I think, was in Mumbai, which was, painting Dada Saheb Phalke in Bandra. Then the Lodi art project that they did, I may be mistaken which is the first, but these are one of the early ones that they did, where it is a government residential quarters. They had these blank facades, but they picked them up and they kind of started painting it. They got artists from not only across India, but across the globe. And it kind of becomes a season. Every year they get certain walls and they kind of paint it. After Delhi, they went to Chennai, they came to Bombay again, Bangalore, and it's kind of picked up. What they do is, again, they take art out to areas where it's not accessible. They make these highly dense residential areas livelier, give the youth over there to something to look forward to, and bring in a sense of pride. This, becomes a low-hanging fruit for a lot of people. So any flyover, any wall, you just have, sometimes they don't make sense, but sometimes it's fine to have a lot of kind of wall art that you see over there. But at the same time, I think there's more that can be done in terms of bringing art into the public domain. And not necessarily everything has to be, big budgets, or it doesn't have to only have government support. Because what I've tried to show across is that art in public space comes, or should come, with a desire from the artist, from the person who's commissioning it and funding it, to make a difference into the space, to leave a legacy behind, and to create something that's so special that everybody can enjoy. And with that, I kind of finish my perspective on why public art is important and how India has had such a vibrant, journey of starting with the governmental independence, where you wanted to think of placemaking, non-structured, but how now it comes down to something that's very structured. And just on a last point, in the past 6 months, there have been so many people starting foundations and organizations for art and public space. I'm like, what is happening? The builder groups that are doing it. NGMA, that's the National Gallery of Modern Art, has announced a program. It's called PARI, but it means public art. I'm forgetting what it is, but basically it's public art regeneration in India. So good times ahead for art and public space. I think you got it at the right time, so keep.
Thank you so much, Yamini. You're right. It seems like public art or art in public spaces is coming of age, and we will see more and more things that last and more things that can delight the masses. Thank you so much. I love how you brought in art right from independence to today and shared some of the lovely images, especially Pilu Pochkanwala. I have to say that I was looking for that image, and a couple of years back, I asked multiple artists because I remembered having seen it, but I hadn't seen a picture of it. And I
Hmm.
tell you, I kid you not, I trolled the web and I couldn't find a picture. So thank you so much for
I
sharing.
think that was one of the reasons why we connected also, possibly karma doing its bit, saying that let's
Absolutely.
get these two people who've been looking for the same image for so many years now.
Absolutely. First of all, I was gobsmacked because I always thought, and I have to very shamefully admit that I always thought that that Yaksha and the Yakshini were antique pieces that had been found somewhere and they were put up. So thank you for telling. But I love that, their look and their appearance is not modern. I mean, because they're Yaksha and Yakshini, they do look like very.
An anecdote. You know, the face of the Yaksha is actually modeled around an industrialist from that point, from that era. And that was also kind of highlighted by the finance minister saying that they're not all antiquities and, this man's face is here. So he's a great, successful industrialist. So, that is also an interesting story.
God, our wealth. You made a very important point about documentation because just like I couldn't remember seeing that one
Mhm.
sculpture, but there's a lot that the next generation will never see, will never know of, will never will have to reinvent the wheel in terms of finding something. Tell us a little bit more about how that process works. How does the country document its public art?
We have all the, how should I say, the players are all there. So if you have the Delhi Urban Arts Commission, it's just for somebody to kind of make the effort of saying that, you exist as part of your mandate. Could you add this and do this? So I wouldn't say that we don't have any of the frameworks or the means to do it, but it's just the need and the emphasis that needs to kind of, be pushed around. These could very well be, projects that urban planners do, or, art school students kind of take up. It's just, providing the right impetus, making sure that these things are done. And I think it will happen because if you have so many foundations coming up,
Mm.
right? Not everybody will be like churning out sculptures. Maybe some of them, hopefully, if I can speak to them, and I'm hoping to do that with a few of them, saying that why don't you look at this also? It's just a matter of pushing out that agenda, and it has to be done. It has to be broken down. And actually, it has started now. As we speak, I recollect there's a group of artists in Bangalore. It's an artist, an urban planner, and an architect and a photographer. I forget, but it's a group. All they do is on the weekends or whenever they have the time, they go and they photograph all the public monuments. Now they can't, not necessarily the grand ones, but even the little ones that come up outside, any a small lane of an actor who's passed away, or a saint, or Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and they are on Instagram, 080 sculptures. So, and that's how they've come up with the fact that Bangalore, and they're still counting, there are over 700 sculptures or statues that are all across the city. So I think we're at the cusp, so this will kind of happen. I'm a
That's
positive
wonderful
person,
to
so I
know.
believe everything will happen.
I hope this happens in all cities and towns, and even
Exactly. So it's these conversations that can spark somebody's interest and say, hey, we can do this. And I'm sure it will all turn out good.
So I have another question for you. That Nagra Putla that you talked about, I
Mhm.
cross it so often and I've seen it so many times. Now it looks like it's in a private home, right?
Yeah.
So what happens to and again you showed the image of that Varli, that wall art that was there in and then when change happened, it went away.
Mm.
What happens to art like this, which is for public consumption, but it's in a private? How what is this private public? thing that happens, then there is no requirement from them to save it for posterity. And I say this specifically for instance, in Bombay, we had these beautiful chimneys in the mill area. And for me, they were a piece of, I mean, because they're not being used, they're now a piece of
Mm.
heritage, and that is in the public, in a private space, but for public consumption to see.
Mm.
So we couldn't conserve those, and they could very well have been converted into something of public art that would have been used. So what happens with something is in a private area, but it has conspicuous presence?
So this, that I don't know if you caught that when I said that when uh, public spaces or the so-called public spaces like airports
Hmm.
have art that comes in, how do you deal with that? The reason why I use the word so-called is because the definition of what is a public space and what is a private space. And private is easy to define, but how do you define a public space? Now, is an airport a public space? If you go through it in the legal definition, it's not,
Hmm.
because it's controlled by a corporation. For instance, all the airports in India are now a PPP model. It's public-private partnership. So when you have a public and a private partnership, the space inherently then becomes something that is a public and a private space. There are public areas in the terminal or an airport, which is the outside area. But even then, the right to admission, one, because of the nature of that building, is that it's not necessarily accessible to public, correct? But at the same time, because it's a mode of transport, it gets identified as a public space. So that's one way of looking at it. Now, the example that we're talking about is the Shivsagar estate or the Nagaraputra. There is no way anybody can control it, saying that you can't demolish it or you can't remove it. Okay, because it's funded by an individual, it is on their property, but you get to access it because it's visible to all. Now, in a situation like that, again, it's the corporations like the municipal corporations, or possibly a foundation like an RPG foundation, or there is, the RNZ foundation, who could be brought into play and say that, okay, you do what you want, but we will take charge of it. We will kind of conserve it and we can reuse it. But that is initiative by individual that needs to come in, because the public at large has no stake or ownership in that particular artwork. So, you know, it's something that needs to be navigated with the help of institutions willing to come forward to conserve it.
Thanks. Jyoti had a question about the Yakshini. I think you were talking about the Palakkad Yakshini at the time, and she said, traditionally, I've never heard of these and why these sculptures, but you had already talked about them in the RBI building. Do you want to dwell a little bit on that? I think she missed that part of the talk.
Okay. So, particularly the question is to RBI or
No,
just,
it's for the Palakkad Yakshini.
so why the figure of Yakshini?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
She said, but traditionally, I've never heard of the Yakshinis being talked about. So why was this figure made?
Oh, so Yakshini, okay, fine. Uh, there's another interesting story. So Yaksha and Yakshini are the demigods or semi-gods. Originally, they are also what you like to call as the pre-Vedic deities, which were incorporated in Buddhism and in Jainism largely. What are these figures? The Yakshini definitely is a tree spirit, a goddess of fertility. And she is supposed to be the one who blesses women to have children. She is the one who protects children, and she dwells in the forest. The best example of Yakshinis are all with Buddhist monuments, and uh, uh, there's one which is in the Patna Museum, the Didarganj Yakshini. Just look it up online. She's a fantastic, beautiful woman made in sandstone. She stands at about 4 feet tall, and she dates back to the 4th century BC, which is in the Mauryan period. Who commissioned and all, lots of details, but an absolutely beautiful sculpture. The other examples of Yakshinis are, in Sanchi Stupa. So Sanchi Stupa, the Toranas or the gateways, you have 4 gateways, north, south, east, west. So you have the vertical pillars and you have the crossbars. At the corner of these, in this the bracket space that you have the Yakshini figure. And what does the Yakshini? The most famous one, again, you could quickly look it up, the Shala Bhanjika. Now, what is Shala? Shala tree. Bhanjika is the one who's holding it. Now, she's supposed to be so virile and fertile, that even if she touches the Charlotte tree in whatever time of the year, it will burst out into flowers and fruits. And that's her potency, and that's how she was venerated. Now, you may wonder, Buddhism, which is such a dry religion, which talks about abstinence and forces, not forces, but expects its monks to be completely abstain from everything. What are these doing? The reason why the Yakshinis were kind of incorporated into Buddhism and Jainism is because the people, the common masses, were so how should I say, attached, or were so with such staunch followers, or believed in her powers, that they could not imagine following a religion which did not have a deity that could bless them and protect them. And hence they got incorporated, but they were always on the outside, on the doorways. Jainism also had to kind of take them in. And Yaksha is, what you say, Kuber. He's always showed holding money. Again, forest dweller, extremely powerful, blesses you with wealth, blesses you in the business trips. So these were deities that could not be messed around with, to put it very simply. And they became a part of, the mainstream religion of Buddhism and Jainism. And then subsequently also, they come into your epics of Mahabharata, where when they are in the Agyatavas, one of the yakshas comes out from the lake and questions all the five brothers. So that's how, they're part of the Indian tradition.
Okay, moving on to the Antiquities Act. How did that impact the Indian artists?
So the Antiquities Act basically said that anything that was more than 100 years old cannot be exported out of the country. That's one, so that you could stop en masse, looting of the country and things going outside the country. So that was one thing, to hold it into the country. The second thing that the Antiquities Act did was that you could not trade into it until and unless you were a registered dealer. You kind of noted down and got a certification from the Archaeological Survey of India saying that where it comes from, how do you come to own it. So nobody in the country can, just go onto a shop and buy an antiquity and say, I went to the shop, but it has to have a provenance. Provenance is basically tracing back the history of the work as to when was the first time that it was bought, and that it's not looted from a temple. That was the original intention. However, it has been detriment. So it doesn't impact the living artists. So it doesn't impact the current day practitioners of sculpture. But it does impact, uh, trade. It does impact the market. That's why if a new person who's living in India, who just wants to have a collection of the antiquities, it's very difficult because you don't have overboard clear provenance document, people dealing with it, far few between. So you have an artisans, you'll have something in Delhi, or there are 2, 3 people who sell, and then it becomes the prices are driven up. In fact, it's not a very nice kind of a space to be dealing or working in. So while the intentions are to protect the monuments, to protect the sculpture, it is also detrimental. Also, what is happening is that as we move along, in 1972, they said 100. Does this also impact, let's say, an artist like M.F. Hussain, who in another 20 years falls in that bracket? Now, will you consider that as an antiquity because it's just 100 years old? Cannot be blanket, right? So that those are the gray areas that need to be addressed now and quickly.
So I think someone was talking about a lot of wall art being there in Bandra and Sassoon-Dock, and you
Mm.
first shared the Start initiative, and I've seen some of the exhibitions at Sassoon-Dock, which the first time in Start, and it was delightful to see. You
Yeah,
could
yeah,
literally walk through the gallery at the dock and
yeah.
go through it. Okay, there's another interesting question. I don't know who this iPhone person is, so I can't say your name. That airport art is amazing, but how many people do actually stop by and appreciate the art is a big question, and I'd like you to answer that, especially because we were talking about it a little bit before.
Mm. So I consider myself lucky if 1% of the passengers actually stop and look at it. That's it. That's a simple straight line answer. But having said that, I'll tell you why I give that figure. Why? I mean, it's not a study or a survey that's done. It's my gut feel, and it's what I've been looking at for the past so many years. Because what happens is that for a first-time traveler or for a person who's not into art, there is no anticipation or expectation that they will see art in that space. You will expect to see shops, you will expect to see food joints, but you not expect to see art. So that's not there. So you don't go looking for it, okay? Unless you happen to be from the world of art or you're interested in art. However, the the objective, okay, when unlike a gallery, when you do put art into a non-art space, the idea is not that appreciation or have that first how should I say, it's not an experience that is as intimate, okay. It is something that over a period of time it builds in, it becomes part of your peripheral vision, that you start experiencing it holistically. And that's why when I said I want it to be part of a traveler's journey from the word go, not call it out like a gallery or a museum. So that's why in Bangalore we call it an art program, okay. And we're very conscious of the word that we use. So I say art in public spaces, okay. And it's not public art, because public art means completely something else. What Altaf did, that is public art, which is getting in the public, involving them. But this is art in public spaces. Also, uh, when we put it out into a domain which is a non-art domain, the hero, and this is what the conversations that I've had with all the artists who participated, or when we have them, I said it's not about your artwork, it's not your signature value. Okay, please understand that the hero is the space. So your art has to be geared for that space. It has to, it has to uh, kind of be a part of that environment and enhance that, to enhance the experience of a person within that space. So it's never going to be loud. It's never going to be about, the flourish. It will always be about how it kind of, and I believe one of the best compliments that I had, though the person didn't mean it as a compliment, was like, oh, it's so subtle, you can miss it. I said, but that's great. You know, if you're sitting there, you will see it. Maybe not for the first time, but maybe, otherwise. So that's, I think if it blends into, I mean, not blends into, but it becomes part and parcel of that space, then it becomes a place-making thing. Then you begin to kind of say, oh, I'm waiting near that red colored thing, or that shining, thing which is suspended from the ceiling. That's it. You've made a mark. And that's the success of the art program. So it's not so much about how many people will see it, but it's about over a period of time, how it becomes the space.
I think for me, it's also sometimes just the serendipity of finding something like the floor
Yeah.
art. You suddenly walk and you're not expecting it there, and you find
Yeah.
it. It's that little momentary joy it gives to see
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that, and
Yeah.
you belong to it for a while, and you sort of move on.
Correct.
Vinita says that the Kolkata airport also has interesting artwork with a lot of museum displays, etc., with local artists' work. So, how important is it to bring in the local artists, you think, into these spaces?
I think it has to have that voice. It has to have the representation. When, but not at the cost of compromising on the, what kind of work comes in. So we were very conscious that just because it's a local artist doesn't mean they have to be there if it doesn't it doesn't meet a certain standard, it doesn't have certain messages and a certain production value, because at the end of the day, that matters. At the same time, we were very conscious that we have to have a broader representation of the artists from that particular region. And hence the desire, or hence the conscious effort of announcing an open call. So, what is an open call? Basically, you announce it in the local newspapers, in the local languages, on social media, and send it across to people that you may not know. Because if I'm from the art circuit and my experiences, or the network is the art world, which is a market driven thing, which is Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Chennai, or the art schools that I know, I will only know those. But there is more than that happens. There are self-taught artists. The traditional artists have a different, forum that they go in. The designers will be in a different silos. So to break through that silos, you need to open up the challenge, the channels of communication. And I think that we did successfully. When we announced it, it was in the midst of the lockdown. And perhaps that helped us because everybody was glued to their the devices and to social media, and hence the very first open call we had 300 responses. And then the second one, which was, then it became like for a monumental sculpture, 60 foot or whatever, so then you have only a pool of sculptors doing it. Then we had something for photography, then it became media specific. But all throughout it was saying, hey, let's go out and that's how the local kind of artist also came into the fray. And we had a representation. So the youngest artist that we've had was, there were two of them. They were still graduate or master students when they sent in their proposal, and it didn't matter to us. And the senior most was somebody who had been working for 60 years, and he also sent in through an open call. So, you know, and just to kind of say safeguard the representation of local. So the Airports Authority of India has a guideline which says that 60 to 70% has to be local artist representation. Local means that state representation. Then it says 30 to 20, or whatever the percentages, can be nationwide, and 10% can be international. So there is also a mandate, which is, if people choose to follow it or want to follow it, it's a guideline that exists.
There is a question from Paris saying if we find a space which can be beautified using art,
Mhm.
uh, who does one reach out to if you wanted to beautify some space in Mumbai, for instance?
So it depends again what kind of space. Is it like a public space? When I say public space, it means, is it a traffic island? Is it a pavement? Is it a public park? They all fall under different authorities, but by and large is the municipal corporation for Mumbai specifically that comes into play. You have to reach out to them and wade your way through the paperwork and figure out who's your right person to do it. The other thing that you can do is, go to possibly an NGMA and say that, listen, I want to do this. Can you help me? Who the right person would be. That kind of gives you a better leverage to say that you want to do it. Also, what helps is, rather than saying, I want to beautify it, I'm blunt. You say, I have the resources, I have a funder, I have an artist, take it, help me do it. It will work better.
Vinita has a question about the polymer cows and buffaloes near Churchgate Station, and
Mhm.
do you, which are multicolored, do you have a view on them?
So that happened as a cow parade, and there was the multiple artists. If I recollect, 10 years ago, this was a project that was announced, and the cows were there were standard cows that were given, and artists were invited to paint and create something. I can't kind of remember, but I think it's fine. It's fun. It doesn't have to be serious. It's there, so it's okay.
Pretty much like the cows that you see when you go to Switzerland.
Yeah, it's a cow parade. I think that's where the inspiration came from, and that was the whole idea.
Paris again asks if you have a list of organizations or groups who have started art, because you've been talking about some groups. Do you have a list that you can share
Organizations that have gone into public art.
into art in public spaces?
Okay, so there is RMZ Foundation, that's the RMZ builders from Bangalore. Embassy Group, again from Bangalore, that has started their art foundation, which is Public Art Trust of India, PATI. They're both on Instagram. Then I said there is the NGMA that has started their Public Art Foundation. There is RPG Foundation that has worked in the past with the municipal corporation to beautify the art project to the city public areas. Recently, as of 2 weeks ago, there was the Jaipur Center for Art, which is again, they have presence on Instagram. These are five that I can name from the top of my head, and I'm sure in another 3 months I'll have some more people who've joined in already. But these are the five that I know of who are there and doing work. In fact, during the Art Mumbai, RMZ Foundation had put up a whole lot of works which were part of their art and public space program for that. So if you happen to be there, you could have seen it. But these foundations are very active on the social media. They have their website. So you can always reach out to them and, engage if you want to do something.
Um, a couple, of course, lots of compliments coming your way for an interesting, brief yet interesting talk. Maria Lobo says that she's a tourist guide in Mumbai and she points out these wall murals that you've been talking about. Pavitra has a question for you. Could you share about the thought process behind using bamboo and vegetation on the T2 terminal at Bangalore and the
So,
Bharatanatyam mudras at the Delhi airport?
okay. Uh, Bangalore Airport. So the whole idea was one, terminal in a garden, sustainability, and the use of local materials. That's where the whole thing of bamboo kind of comes in to create, a visual language and to kind of emphasize the use of bamboo as a building, as a construction material in a, you know, in a structure that requires resilience and needs to be safe, all of that. Then the use of green, it ties into the pillar of bringing in the greenery back to the city and, yeah, creating a space that is welcoming and is warm. And that's how a lot of greens in multiple ways have been used. So you have walls, green walls which are there, you have planters, you have something that's very interesting in the check-in hall and across certain areas in the terminal, which is the suspended or the hanging garden, which kind of comes in. So the whole idea is to create a space, especially a space like an airport, because so far what we've seen or what used to be done mostly was these steel glass structures. The functionality of an airport is pretty much the same. Every airport will have a check-in, will have the security, there will be retail, and you have the boarding piers. So functionally, the requirements of the space are very much same, and all airports end up looking the same. So then this trend or the idea that how do you make a difference in a space that is so driven by function and security? Please bear that in mind, because these are the two main guiding things. Like, how do you make the space more functionally efficient, and how do you make it the most secure space? And then to lay on that something that is aesthetically driven and create a unique identity. The whole idea of like what Mumbai airport was like, how do you make a place out of the space? So see, again, the thing that I use is a space so far. It's only when the art comes in and is successfully becomes a place. So it's all about this navigation of converting a space. It's like converting a box into something that becomes your home. So it's that process that drove the need for bringing in bamboo for the greens. And then what the mudras in Delhi airport? You want
Yeah,
to?
the Bharatanatyam mudras at Delhi airport. I thought they were the Buddhist
They were not Bharatnatyam. They were
yeah,
more to do with the,
Buddhist
yeah.
yeah. Okay, a couple of things. One, somebody's asked you for your social media handles, so if you could just put them in the chat
The
box.
chat box.
And I think we will keep this as the last question. But Chaitra wants to know, when it comes to challenges like preservation and vandalism of art and public spaces, how do you address that? And what role does the government play in bringing in civic sense and changing people's perspective towards art? That's a very big question and an important one. And I think we'll keep that as our last question as well.
Okay, so I think when it comes to vandalism, the government can't do anything, right? You can't hold the government accountable for everything that happens. It is us and us alone who can bring that sense of ownership and a sense of pride in it. This is such a large and an important question because it then goes back to how do you instill this sense? Okay. It pains me even forget art. If I see somebody kind of throwing something on the street, if it is wherever possible, I go and stop that person and say, please don't do that. It's to the point that my family gets embarrassed when I do things like that. So I've tried to contain myself. Anyway, that apart, I think it comes in from the sense of belonging and the sense of pride that you have. It's not that we don't know, okay? Because when we travel overseas, all rules are followed. But somehow, when you come into our own motherland, we tend to take it for granted and we don't respect it enough. Also, I think it comes in from school education where the sensitization is not emphasized enough. It also comes from homes where we don't sensitize our children and that what or how you need to behave. I don't think it should be restricted to art, but it's to everything, whether it's your public transport, whether it's your city, not to litter. It comes from that civic sense which needs to be instilled, and it is for every individual to do it within that circle, and only then that ripples grow and it comes out. The government can impose fines, can put up labels, but that's the end of it. Okay, we have this thing. In fact, just 2 days ago, the beautiful sculpture in the check-in hall. Okay, these are travelers, supposedly who would be taking a flight. Have a separate particular sense. Most of the sculptures and most of the art which is there in Terminal 2, I have been adamant with the operation team saying that we will not have queue managers, we will not have barriers where we say do not touch the art. There's not a single sign in the terminal which says do not touch the art, which ties into the question like how many people see it or how, what is the engagement ratio to it. Because what I feel is that it will take a little bit of time, so please bear with me. What I feel is that when you talk about art, especially when you need to go to a gallery or go to a museum to see it, I mean, what is the percentage of people or children that are taken to these spaces? By and large, a weekend means a celebration on the mall, but how many do go into a gallery? It works both ways. I mean, people are not inclined to go, and also the galleries are not welcoming enough, the museums are not welcoming enough. Again, I began by saying that people in the art world tend to kind of become very dense and obtuse in what they put out there. For anybody who's new to the realm of art and is inclined or wants to go, it's made so scary, and you don't understand what's written over there. You're scared to talk in a gallery, you start whispering. You wonder, can I talk, can I sit? There's that fear factor because it's made so like an aura in an ivory tower. Why? That's not the objective. If art is about communication and expression, it should invite people. It should invite people to engage with. It should be something that is positive, a fun way to look at it. Not all of art, but at least, there should be an effort that's made, like you're making an effort saying that let's do an heritage walk. You can do it in an AC car, you can do a 15-minute thing, you can do it for children. Make it accessible. And that is the weakness which comes with, it's part and parcel of the art world. And you can't help it, but it's the nature of the beast. But there has to be an effort. Why do I bring this about? Because there's a lack of, there's a gap between people who can go, want to go, should go, can't go. If art itself is not, you know, embraced, then how do they embrace it when it comes in a non-art space? Then how do you tell them that you need to respect it? And that's the reason why I said, no, don't put these things out. There are only 3 works where I've had to put a glass barricade around it. One is because the artwork had sharp edges and objects, and one because people started taking away things from that particular artwork. I said, okay, now lot is gone, 25% gone, now let's put it and let's stop it at that particular point in time. But apart from that, all the other 57 artworks are free for people to touch, engage with, and feel, be familiar with it. But that gets taken to another level. For instance, the point that I was making, in the check-in hall, where you have this large 12-foot sculpture in bronze, there were Coke cans that were left all around it and Economic Times littered around it. So if you're smart enough to read Economic Times, and if you can spend on a Coke can, I'm sure you have the sensibility that there's a bin 3 feet away. You can go and put it in there. That's where then it starts, the agitation kind of starts. And so these are obviously, you can't say that these are, hooligans or these are unsavory elements of our society. No, they're not. It's just, apathy. And that's where it kind of sits. And so I don't hold government accountable. I don't hold the authorities accountable. I hold us accountable. And this is what we are. We have to accept it. Okay. Then there was, sorry, I got into a rant. Then there was the other part of the question was conservation. Okay, conservation deals in with the aspect of documentation. Like if you have everything documented, and that's what we followed in Bangalore. Every artist kind of had to submit, but we gave them a format saying that like fill in the blanks. What have you used? What have you used for joining? Blah 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 blah. Every detail is documented. Once you have that, then you need to kind of have a framework saying that you have a conservation specialist who comes and reviews it. So day one, this was when it was installed. This is how it was made. Year one, what has happened to it? Do you need intervention to come in? Also, we need to be aware, right? It's art. It is bound to age. It is not going to remain pristine. At what level do you come in and stem the conservation, or step the deterioration that happens? Sometimes an artist would want the work to kind of gain patination, to have the finger marks. So those are conscious choices that have to be predefined, and then you follow through. And then you need to do not it's not intrusive conservation or restoration that is required. You do preventive conservation to ensure that it lasts for a longer time.
So very true. And I hope that we can, I think it requires a cultural shift within all of us to be able to honor and respect public spaces and also the art within them. Starting from cleanliness, like you very, very rightly said, and moving on to maintaining and, not vandalizing. It's absolutely entirely on to every one of us. And I hope that we can keep conversations like this going and bit by bit have more people.
Yes, like I said, I'm the ever optimist and I'm hopeful. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm sure in the next 10 years, there'll be 20 of us, and then it will take time, but it will grow.
Absolutely. And on that very, very positive note, thank you so much, Yamini. It was a delightful evening. Thank you so much for your clarity of thought and expression and depth of knowledge that you shared with us. It was really very, very special to have you for our 250th talk. And thank you, our audience, for joining. We hope to keep bringing you more such talks for many, many more weeks, many, many more Saturdays. So keep joining us and thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend and see you next week. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Suki.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.